Well, I'm so honored and so excited to have another conversation with you, Kristen. Just been so awakening within myself, our conversations that we've been having as far as diving more into how our energy processes through our body, how our elevation or the term awakening process really comes forward for a lot of individuals, but just how our acceleration of settling into ourself, allowing our bodies to open up, blossom, flower, and just radiate our divine authenticity and beauty, has been just such a process for so many people on the planet right now. And part of going through this process is sometimes just kind of understanding a little bit about what's actually happening. Why are we feeling a lot of the symptoms that we're feeling? Why are we experiencing a lot of the things that we're experiencing? And is it really us stepping backwards if we hit these little walls or feel tired or feel kind of agitated a little here and there along the process? Or is that something that is more of a detox? And so, as we get to dive into this conversation today, I just want to say I'm so excited to be here with you, Kristen, and looking forward with so much love to where this conversation is going to go today.
Me too, Becca. I'm really excited for it. And the last one that we did, I think I said this at the end, it just felt healing in and of itself. Just having the conversation with you, I walked away from it feeling healed just through the words that were shared and the heart energy that was shared. And I think that's going to lead into a lot of what we have to talk about today as far as um, the importance of creating safety in conversation can be healing in and of itself. And when we show up with mindfulness and compassion and curiosity to hold space for a conversation, that anybody really has the power to do that for one another. And so hopefully our conversation today can inspire that in others as well.
Oh my gosh, that is so beautiful. I love that. Holding space for others. I think this is actually a vital point, as far as what we're all going through. We're all feeling the shifts and changes, and whether or not we're conscious and aware of it on the planet, or whether or not we're fully mindful and observing it and watching it, there's a lot that is happening. And I think one of the most interesting things I'm noticing for individuals is this awakening within the self to learning how to seek help and actually become vulnerable and share the experience with others. Have you been noticing that as well?
It's interesting that you say that because I would say that I witnessed that in my years that I worked in healthcare, and that's why I left healthcare to do this work that I'm doing now. Just because I think there's just generations of folks that where it wasn't safe to be vulnerable, and so that's just not a part of their everyday life to reach out for help or to ask for help or to be vulnerable or to be open to growing and changing and looking at things in a new way, or there's safety in staying the same and stability in staying the same. And I think that's been so ingrained through different traumas people have been through and different eras we've been through in the past, that have led us to where we are today. So I would say that was a theme for a big part of the folks I was working like with in healthcare that would come to see me for help is I wanted to go deeper. I wanted to get to the root cause, to get to the trauma that brought them to where they were. But and it's okay. Like sometimes people just aren't ready for it. It's not in their wheelhouse to do that. There hasn't been the safety in their life to do that. So I think sometimes people can get shamed and saying, well, you're not willing to do this or you're not willing to do that. And I think willingness is something that's important um, to just talk about because it's not necessarily a conscious choice people are making. It's something that's been laid down deep in their unconscious. And so we can only have choice of what we are conscious of. We're not, we don't have choice over what's sitting underneath our awareness, right? So that's the beauty of the Hakomi work that I think we're going to talk about today is that it helps to bubble up what's been in our unconscious. And we can talk about different ways that people can do that in their day-to-day life as well.
Yeah, and that is so spot on because it's definitely been a generational thing where it wasn't safe, or it wasn't taught, or it was maybe actually um, advised against to actually express one's emotions or even make a big deal about anything, right? It was kind of considered, oh, just be tough, just get through it. Oh, what's your problem? Why are you making an issue of this? And,
Right.
that kind of translated into also a lot of what we might refer to as, say, the star seeds, the light workers, or those that are on an awakening path, those that are here to actually bring wisdom back about
Mhm.
our heart self connections and who we are as a galactic race. And one of the things that I see as a massive theme is that we didn't come in with a support system around. And so even if we were born into a loving home that knew how to mirror and create a sense of safety, many times still the things one felt inside were different
Mhm.
than what we're maybe taught through the home beliefs or the religious beliefs or the cultural beliefs in that time. And so there's still a sense of even feeling shut down or hiding or even not sharing with others what one used to dream about, the
Mhm.
invisible friends. It's invisible to others, but maybe not invisible to you, friends that you had as
Yeah.
a child, or the things that you sensed or perceived or acknowledged. And it is really beautiful how that is really transpiring now as something that is a lot more safe to talk
Mhm.
about.
Mhm.
So
Love that.
within that, there's a huge spectrum of individuals. I would say almost all of humanity has aspects to where we can start to learn to become more vulnerable, more open, and trust actually starting to share the things that we have been holding inside and not felt safe enough to like reveal or express to others. So
Mhm.
definitely, I think this is really a topic that will touch so many that will be drawn to this. And I
Mhm.
do want to dive into Hakomi with you because this is something that came into my reality probably 15, 20 years ago. And I never dove into it as an actual study, but definitely read the book and just kind of was inspired by the technique of it. And I wanted to start, if it would be okay. There's a couple quotes. I actually have the one of the
Oh,
Hakomi books. I felt inspired to get it again because it's the one that I had come across earlier in my years. But
awesome.
I wanted to actually read a couple of things in here. Oops, I just lost it.
Perfect.
And this
Mhm.
one's from chapter 4 called Healing Relationships. So I think it's really appropriate. And this is from Chogyam Trungpa, a quote from Becoming a Full Human Being. And it says the basic work of healthcare professionals in general and of psychotherapists in particular is to become full human beings and to inspire full human beingness in other people who feel starved about their lives.
Mhm. Oh, man, that's like poetry. We can only take people as far on their healing journeys as we've gone on our own, and, this really speaks to I think what we are doing a better job of in healthcare is we're having the conversation about trauma-informed care and about how when we project our own unconscious things, beliefs, traumas, on others, that we can actually re-traumatize people if we're not creating a safe environment for them, which goes back to what we were talking about before, well, just suck it up. What's wrong with you? You're making a big deal out of this. I think the more that we start to heal ourselves and go on our own healing journey, that we can better show up for others. And that is one of the foundations of Hakomi, is creating a complete safe space where we put our own beliefs and our own agendas aside to just let whatever it is that's supposed to unfold for the person in front of us in that session to come up. And the beautiful thing about the Hakomi training, when I took it, it's a 2-year long training that we were doing the healing process over those 2 years as well, which a lot of healing modalities don't offer that. We get trained in a short amount of time and you're sent out to work with others, but you haven't there's no requirement in a lot of healing arts for anybody to have done their own healing work before becoming a practitioner. And so I think that was a lot of people obviously take that route on their own and are self initiated down that route, but it's just not a requirement for a lot of practicing health practitioners or even healers in the spiritual world to do their own process, right? So I think it's beautiful that that is ingrained in the training itself. um, and I do believe that we're in this time right now where, for a large part, and this certainly is not true for a lot of the world, because we're still dealing with creating physical safety for humanity. That is something I still believe on this earth doesn't exist overall, is physical safety. However, depending what area of the world you're in, what type of life, I guess, that you're living right now, a large part of the world does have physical safety as well. And I think that is where, I'm in my 40s. So our generation growing up, our parents did a really great job at providing physical safety for us, right? So when we have that physical safety, our needs are being met as far as we have clothes on our backs, we have a roof over our head, it's safe to be in the home. And I want to acknowledge that it wasn't safe for a lot of people growing up. A lot of people have had traumas growing up that did not receive physical safety as well. But I'll say for those who have, where we're creating safety now is in emotional safety. And this is where it comes to that holding space with mindful, compassionate curiosity for others to have emotional experiences so that we can start to move up higher into more of who we are and sharing our spark in the world and being our unique selves and connecting with our spiritual selves. I do believe, I think we talked about this last time, in order for us to fully embody our spiritual selves, our lower three chakras need to be balanced. So we need our root chakra to be balanced. We need physical safety. We need to be in touch with our creativity and just who we are as human beings. And we need to be physically and emotionally safe in order for us to fully embody our spirits. And so as we do the healing work to start to unblock some of those patterns that we're stuck in that are preventing us from being our most authentic self, the fears, the shame, the judgment, the criticisms. As we start to clear some of those blocks and start to feel more emotionally safe within our own bodies, we're able to start inviting more of our spiritual essence into our body as well.
So many beautiful points in that, and I absolutely agree. There is, almost in any path of initiation or diving into oneself, whether we look at it through chakra system practices, even uh, Native American practices, all of this is many times first about coming in to the security within oneself, as far as one's rooted place within the earth. And there's even an acknowledgement of a a earth chakra that's even down
Mm.
more embedded than our root chakra. Like our root chakra then embeds into our earth chakra, which allows us to even have a sense of feeling as though we belong to this planet, that we actually feel okay and okay and safe to be here. Because I know there's a lot of beings that especially beings that come to me that'll be like, I feel like I was dropped off here, like I don't belong here, like I'm not even supposed to be on earth, something is wrong. And there is, on a quantum level, an understanding that we are from the stars, absolutely.
Mhm.
Yet at the same time, here we are. There's an aspect of our soul or oversoul that is choosing to be a part of this vibrational experience.
Yeah.
And when we let ourselves fully dive into the experience of being human, being
Mhm.
here, there is a deeper level to which we can experience all creation. And there is so many traumatic signatures within where we definitely have not felt rooted or grounded. into our life experience. And many times this does come from our early childhood experiences, but sometimes it is past life
Yeah.
or soul field memories that we're holding of not feeling safe because there has been some curious history that has
Just a
happened on
little
this planet.
bit.
A little lack of that safety that you talked about.
Mm.
So the physical safety, I definitely I hadn't really thought about it in that way, and so thank you for bringing it up that way because I think that is absolutely vital, and I think we're still quite far from truly feeling it because,
Mhm.
as someone who likes to travel, imagine even walking around your own city or town or place, a lot of times it's not full 100% physical safety. You still got to be
Mhm.
mindful. You still got to kind of make sure you lock your car, you got your belongings where they need to be, you're being mindful of where you're going. We're still not in a society or a consensus thinking where we are honoring each
The
other.
safety in another. Yeah.
But you're so spot on with that is at a much higher level of being actualized upon the planet, and it's already opened the doorways for emotional
I
safety.
think that's the next level. Yeah.
Yes. And I'd love for you, I definitely have some things to add about emotional safety, but I'd love to get some of your input on what are we going to experience when we start to feel emotional safety?
I love that question. I'm going to come back to that in a second because I wanted to add one thing on too with the folks that you said that were feeling like they weren't grounded here onto Earth. Some practices I've been doing lately is actually connecting to the core of the Earth and connecting to the consciousness of Mother Earth. And something that keeps coming through for me is that the Earth herself has her own consciousness, I believe. And so something that just keeps coming to me and keeps coming to me is this felt sense that we've been invited here as well, that Mother Earth invited our soul down to this earth and she gave us a body to live in order to help her heal as well. And so our manifestation here is in service to helping her consciousness rise as well. And that's just something that keeps coming to me. And I think for anybody that's feeling like they're very separate from the earth or they're like we're both. And when you think like we always think of the earth being below and the stars being above, but when you think of the earth, there is no above and below, like there is no above and below when you really look at the entirety of the universe, right? So, um, but grounding down into the earth and just knowing that we're welcome here, knowing that we've been invited here, knowing that we have purpose for being here, can be a nice practice to just help ground into that energy a little bit as well. And I've been starting to play with having conversations with like, why did you invite me here? And I do believe that as we ground into that earth energy, just like the trees communicate to one another through the earth, that all humans are connected in a way through the earth as well. We often think of it as being connected more from our higher consciousness to one another, but I think there's a way that we're connected in through the earth energy too.
Love that. And that definitely resonates so much. And I love the tree metaphor within there because I do feel they are one of our most ancient ancestors upon the earth that really hold a network of consciousness for us. So that is so beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. And I just want to add, that is one of the things I love about human design.
Mm.
In your human design chart, it actually shows your design aspect, the kind of the signature of your connection that you made with the earth when I feel your soul made an agreement with the earth or reached out to the earth consciousness. And I really feel our body kind of leading us back. Oh my gosh,
Perfect.
I totally feel our body is her gift to us, exactly like you're saying, but not so much a gift in like, here, I want to give you a present, but kind of like, thank you so much for connecting with me to reach out to help me.
Mm.
Here
Mm.
is what is hurting in my body. Will
Mm,
you please help me?
mm. Wow.
And I think
That
that's
brings me
where,
to tears.
yeah, I don't, it just,
Uh,
when I started seeing that through that perspective, I literally started feeling every childhood trauma, wound, every emotional scarring, all of that as actually what she was showing me she had been experiencing for millennia.
wow. Yeah. There's so much more going on to our existence here to wake up to and to be aware of. And it really changes how we move through the world, I think, when you can settle into that.
And I think that leads us right back to emotional
Yeah.
safety because it's like, again, a lot of these things we're holding traumatized inside, even from a generational perspective, they might be things that have been passed on down the tree branches for generations after generations, but maybe the consciousness of our ancestors wasn't at a place for a significant amount of time to know how to process it or to have the emotional safety
Hmm.
to allow it to come to the surface so that it could be healed. And so, definitely, I want to just kind of get your perspective on how this emotional safety maybe would look for us and how we can begin to find those messages within that are seeking to come out to be recognized.
Those are two big questions. I think we need to dissect those a little bit. So, how we can tune into our bodies, a whole other conversation. So, let's put that on hold for a second. So, in order to come into emotional safety, if we are doing healing with one and well, let's start with ourselves. Because to come, this is one of the biggest things that I learned when I was going through my own healing process over the past couple years. I would say I was going through one of those dark night of the soul moments, which was lots of fun, but it was very enlightening, and I can see the beauty of everything that happened now that I look back on it. But what I would say is one of the biggest things that we can do is start to create safety within ourselves. And how we start to create safety within ourselves is in how we are talking to ourselves and the things that we are saying to ourselves as well. Because when it comes to our own healing process, when we do find ourselves on our own, working through our own healing, we, in order to feel that shift happen into what's wanting to come forward, into being able to see the things that we've pushed behind because we haven't wanted to see because there's too much blame, shame, guilt, fear connected to them, as we allow those things to come up to the surface, the only way healing can happen is through love and through compassion. It can't happen through further judgment, further blame, further shaming. We actually block our healing process when we hold ourselves in that space. And so, one of the first things we can do for ourselves is to start to learn. And I do really just see it as a skill. I feel like it's something that's innate within us, but it's been so conditioned out of us to be loving and compassionate towards ourselves. And a lot of the folks in the workshops that I run, I teach a tool where we first journal just honestly what's going on in your life right now, and then they read that back to themselves, and then they write a love letter to that part of themselves. And that is the hardest part in the workshop for so many people, is being able to turn towards that part of themselves that's hurting with love. And that's what the practice of compassion is. And so we need to start creating safety within ourselves. But that can be difficult to do. Often we start to reach out to a practitioner, we reach out to a healer in order to learn those practices. So when it comes to being a practitioner or a healer, or even just a human being on this world, being in service to friends, to family, to strangers, we can start to hold safe and compassionate places for others as well. And mindfulness is really the foundation of that. Because what I see happening when we get into the drama of having a fight or having a disagreement or an argument or something that's not resonating between two humans, it's our unconscious aspects of ourselves sparking off of one another. This is how I see it. I see it as a spark. It's like my pain is sparking and your pain is sparking, and the pains are sparking off of one another. And this is what blows up into he said, she said, you did this, you did that, you're not listening to me, I can't, like, it just keeps going back and forth. And if we're not in a calm place when the emotional part of our brain is fired up, we don't have access to the rational logical part of our brain that's actually able to listen to the words that are being saying and to take information in. We can't hear one another when our emotions are flared up. So when we're creating safe space with one another, one of the best things you can do is walk away from an argument, calm and settle things down, and then come back and have a rational conversation. Because when we need to feel the whole wave of our emotions before we can get to a place where we can actually have that rational conversation to come to resolution, and to create safe space. Because when your emotion of fear is coming at somebody's emotion of blame, like, that's not a safe space to be having a healing conversation. So I think when we're in relationship, what there needs to be an agreement of is that both parties need to have an agreement that we are going to come together to hold safe space for one another. I think that's one of the foundational things that we can do in all of our relationships, which is difficult because not everybody's going to be on board or at a place where they're able to do that. And I'm not a psychotherapist. I want to say that. I'm not a relationship counselor. I'm not a psychotherapist. This is just from my own research and from the Hakomi work that I've done and my own journey that I've been on. But there's definitely people out there that are professionals that can help people work through relationship conflicts. But I do believe that if we can create that safe space for one another to ride those waves of emotions together, that is kind of just one of the foundational principles that we need to be working off of that will help to really heal. Because like, we're emotional human beings. We're meant to have emotions. We've been shut down and shut out of our emotions. Our emotions are being used to sway us in marketing, like, and we need to be more aware of our emotional selves, I think, so that we can align with truly what is right for us, because our emotions, they have been used to manipulate us as well, right? And so the more emotional awareness that we have and the more safety we have to experience our emotions, I think that is just going to help us improve our emotional intelligence, I guess, in this world as well. We're still learning that. That's something we're still learning.
Yeah, and you made a comment, actually in one of our correspondences, and you used a phrase, being in charge of our own healing process. And I think this is actually a really powerful phrase you brought forward because, in truth, whether or not we have a degree about knowing how to manage relationships or not, 100% of the people on this planet are dealing with relationships.
Mhm.
We have relationships with each other, meaning other people, but we have relationships with the food we eat. We have relationships with the clothes we wear. We have relationships with the home we live in. We have relationships with our workplace and our job. We have relationships with the earth. And so I do think it is a level of us starting to take mature responsibility of our own healing process and realize that if we are having a conflict with something, that it is about us starting to find those tools that really work for us. Because in truth, there is, even if you kind of dive into Taoists or different levels of mindfulness teachings, there's even a level to which we are told to even be the observer of your own emotions, because
Mhm.
emotions, where are they being triggered from? Where are they being set off in a wave from? And so this also, I think, is why it's so important for those who offer holding space for others. I'm just going to say it that way. Whether
Mhm.
you're a lawyer, whether you're a counselor, a coach, someone who does chart readings for other people, a medical professional, a teacher, I think if we really get down to it, we all have the ability to be holding space for others. Even if you're, you know, managing, say, a gas pump.
Mhm.
I think it's, there's a some kind of podcast or something. I think it's a beautiful, catchy phrase, but it's the Buddha at the gas pump, I think is
I've
what it's
heard that.
called. And it's just a simple yet beautiful perspective that says it doesn't matter what you do, it's how you do it. And even
Mhm.
within the human design perspective, there is an aspect of us starting to learn our own aura, how our energy flows through us. And 50% of us have something that is referred to as a defined emotional solar plexus center, which means that our emotions are constantly fluctuating like the ocean, up and down. And those that have a defined emotional solar plexus center are going to be individuals that get a little bit more um, energetically pressured by the reality around you if things don't have the room to breathe. And I like
Mm.
to say that it requires an ability to kind of get the feedback on what you're receiving and then have a moment to take a breath with it so that you process it through your own energetic field so that the emotional wave can calm and you can come back into your heart or your mindfulness state of allowing, say, your higher mind to begin to now sense what that energy was. And so I think you brought up something really, 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 really important when you said if we are in a charged conversation with someone, and all of a sudden we're feeling our ringing in the ears, pressure in our head, our temperature getting hot, feeling like all of the energy is pressing in our throat center, like, we just feel this triggered response, our nervous system literally going into a fight or flight or freeze of reaction because
Mhm.
we're feeling some pressure from outside of us that is not giving us the permission to have a moment to breathe and think about it. And this comes in arguments all the time. Give me an answer right now. Whose side are you choosing? Are you on their side or are you on my side? Or, oh, well, tell me right now. Do you love me or do you not love me? When you did that, what were you really doing? And, you can see arguments are really like two toddlers or hurt children,
Mhm.
literally seeking love, but utilizing really distorted means to
Mhm.
find validation from another person within. And so there is a lot of times targeting. And when that happens, those with the defined emotional solar plexus center will literally feel like I need to say anything to get out of here as fast as possible.
Mhm.
Being pressured to make a decision on the spot is generally one of the most uncomfortable things for them. And the
Mhm.
time when words will fly out of the throat chakra that do not necessarily align to what they're really actually feeling in their heart. It's just some reactionary defense mechanism that's throwing these things out. And then, as we know, communication or lack of healthy communication is generally what causes almost all imbalances
Mhm.
on the planet, even on to like a light language level. We could even get into the mechanics of it on a very spiritualized level. So I think you brought up something super important that, we are in a huge way being asked to become our own advocate of our healing process, and that there are tools that we can utilize to begin to start to realize, okay, well, if I am not feeling emotionally safe in this moment, what can I do?
Mhm.
Take a deep breath. And honestly, if you truly want to walk that path, it's like, wouldn't that be the loving solution to say, well, rather than use words that might be like daggers or swords, because once a word flies out of our mouth, can't take it back.
Mhm.
Oh my gosh. And I've
Mhm.
been there.
Mhm. Oh, we all have. We all have, for
It's like,
sure.
what do you
100%.
mean? Well, you said this. Well, you said that. And it's like, but that's not what I meant.
Exactly. Oh, and this is where Man, we could do a whole video just on conversation and how to have healthy conversation, healthy communication with one another. But I think that coming back to mindfulness, when we're in that sparking place that you're just talking about right now, is we need to be mindful that that's what's happening. So if you can come into mindfulness and say, my emotions are what are triggering this right now, what is needed. And it's a skill. Again, we have to learn this as a skill. For so many sensitives and empaths, I think growing up, we didn't learn how to say, this is what I need right now. This is what I need for safety. And it's okay to stand up and ask for what you need for safety. And it is terrifying the first few times that you start to do that, because you're interrupting a pattern, right? There's a pattern we have in our relationships where that is just the pattern that both people know, both people are familiar with, having those sparks fly. And so anytime we take a step to interrupt a pattern, it can be a really scary thing to do because you're introducing something new into the relationship, especially if that other person isn't conscious in the relationship and you're starting to become more conscious. That can be a really difficult thing to do. Um, but again, it's in service to us growing and expanding and becoming more our authentic selves. And so when we can, like you said, breathe, ground, come into mindfulness, realize what's happening, know what you need in that moment, whether it is to excuse yourself, walk away. We need to feel our feelings. When we say this is a bad feeling, I'm not supposed to feel this, that's not good for us either. We need to learn how to be more mature in how we feel and express our feelings. So it's one thing to be angry, it's another thing to direct our anger at somebody and be like, you're the cause of my anger. There's a difference in saying you're causing my anger and saying I'm angry right now, or this situation is causing me anger right now. There's a difference in dynamic of that, right? So yes, bringing mindfulness as the foundation practice to first just witness, even if you don't do anything to change that moment, to witness what's going on so that you can go on your healing journey. And the thing that I like to keep saying now is that we can just let life teach us. The more mindfulness that we start to create, the more we become the witness of our life and just observe what is showing up in our lives. You mentioned before this idea that we go backwards sometimes, and I don't think we ever go backwards. We're just where we are right now. And you mentioned it's something that's just coming up that still needs more clearing because we heal in cycles, right? We peel back a layer and then the same lesson comes again, we peel back another layer, and then the same lesson comes again. We can only handle so much at a time, right? So mindfulness really is the key to just be like, this is what's happening. Take a step back and then seek out the help that you need to help you work through that from there.
Mindfulness is probably, I almost call it my mantra of mindfulness, because I think if there's one thing I repeat to share with others over and over and over and over again, it's the idea of mindfulness, becoming
Mhm.
mindful. And the thing is that it's almost so simple that most people just kind of wash over it as just a phrase that we're like, oh yeah, yeah, mindfulness. But mindfulness is actually not super simple in a deep way. It's like, well,
It's
okay, it
true.
sounds simple because it says be the observer observing you,
Yeah.
which means you're now starting to watch yourself move through your life as almost a curiosity, that phrase you have from Hakomi, which is the mindful compassionate curiosity, right? So now you're just curiously observing yourself live your life, where it's like, wow, isn't that interesting? They said that and I felt agitated. They said that and I wanted to yell back. They said that and I felt hurt, or as though I was the victim.
Mhm.
And now we're now catching something, but because we're being mindful, we're not being the sparks flying back and forth, but instead we're having that curiosity that goes, oh, interesting. Where did that originate? Where did that come from? And I
Mhm.
think this is actually the power of the witness, of someone holding space for another. When we do take the time to kind of go deep into our own closets and find our own places where we get triggered, so that we can bring the love back in so that that space is free and safe to express itself again. What we then get to do is actually be a very healthy mirror for others. And that is something that I'm actually going to use a different example for this. My partner, he has an amazing story he shared at one time. And this is going to be in regards to who we maybe choose to be a witness for us through our healing process, because I do still really stand within the energy that all healing is self healing. So
Mhm.
even when we're being with, say, a therapist, a coach, or someone that is mentoring us through a process, in so many ways, they're really truly being a guide. And so he had a situation that was in at one point in time, and this person was a financial advisor. And this financial advisor was like, "Oh, you should sign with me. I'll help you manage everything. I'll take care of all your finances for you. I will help you get this, and this, and we'll really grow your resources." And he looked at him and he said, "Show me a picture of your car. Show me a picture of your house." And the guy was like, what do you mean? Wait, what do you want to see that for?" And it was
Mhm.
almost kind of taken aback. And he said, "If your car isn't nicer than mine and your house isn't in better shape than mine, why would I trust you to manage my finances if you can't manage your own finances?"
Mm, mhm.
And I think that very same concept applies very deeply to allowing ourselves to, when we reach out and seek, that this is why it's so vital and important for those holding space for others. That if this is your career, this is your soul's passion and how you're assisting others, why it's so important for us to do our own work, because we're
Mhm.
truly there to be a mirror.
Yeah.
And part of being a mirror means that you're not triggered, you're not sparking.
Mhm.
When these individuals come in, there is always going to be a realization on a quantum level. There's something that matches in our signature. And are we at the place where that match in our signature is because I've been there? I have compassionate witness for that. And I can now sit with just a loving heart. And this is something you said earlier, which I think is vital: non judgment,
Yeah. It
unconditional.
is the key to self-healing. When you can provide a space for others where they feel completely safe and not judged, to be honest about what's going on with them, because we tend to judge things as good or bad, and so we start to lie to ourselves because if we're wearing the mask of the compassionate person, and I do think that there is a shadow to compassion as well. We can wear the mask of being compassionate because we've been told you have to be the good girl, the kind girl, the nice girl, whatever that signature is. When we can give people the permission to be completely honest about what's going on, there is an energy that lets go when people can just say what's really truly happening. And so the more that we can bring those shadows into the light to be witnessed and seen and heard and felt, when there's that safe place to do that, our whole system just heals itself. And that's what Ron Kurtz witnessed when he was doing in developing this method. Is it wasn't actually a method that he developed, it was a method that he witnessed was happening naturally in the people that he was working with when he held a mindful, compassionate, curious space where we just get curious, like what's coming up, why, like that. It's not even about why that triggered you. It's like that triggered you. What does that remind you of? What do you need that you didn't get? That what need is the body wanting to experience that it was missing, that we can actually provide it now to complete that process and complete that cycle. And so when we complete the missing parts in the cycle, that's when that healing and that repair starts to happen.
Mm. I'd love to dive in a little bit more into that. So, when we get curious about what's coming up. I'd love to just maybe take us on a little bit of what the process is or how Hakomi works.
What I love that's different about Hakomi, and the reason I love this is because my own defense mechanism is to use my mind to override my emotions. So I've always talked myself out of, you're fine, you're okay, you're not scared, don't worry about it, just keep going. You're making a big too big of a deal of it, like you said before, like you're fine, don't worry about it, keep going. I've always used my mind to override my emotions. And so a lot of times when I've gone for healing work, I get into that defensive place where my mind really wants to defend what's going on. And so what I love about Hakomi though is that we can't like I can't remember who this comes from. They said that we can't solve problems at the level they've been created. So if we created a problem at the level of the mind, it's like an uphill battle to try to use the mind to correct that process because we haven't created safety right yet. So we need to create safety within the body first. So what I love about Hakomi as opposed to talk therapy is that the story actually isn't what is significant. What's significant is how the body is responding to what's happening. So it's not so much about understanding the story, going back and talking about the story, trying to reframe the story. That happens after the healing happens. And I think this is what we're doing backwards is that we're trying to use the mind to reframe and create a new story. And then we expect the body to catch up with that. Whereas if we did it the opposite way, if we started to tune into the body and held the body in a space where safety can be cultivated, the mind, it's like a downhill process from there. The mind just automatically catches up. And so in Hakomi, the process is just getting mindful in your body about what is coming up as you talk about or bring into your awareness whatever the issue is that you're having, whether it was like a fight you just had or whatever it is that we would typically come and start to share or talk about. We get curious about what's happening in the body. So you might notice things like your heart starting to race, or we notice how we hold our posture. So when I get talking, I get excited. I use my hands a lot, right? So
Yeah.
we just start to point out these different things that happen. Maybe you start talking and you start looking up to the ceiling, or you put your head down, or your shoulders come in, or whatever it might be. We start to notice how the body is responding to the story that we're telling. So, sensations in the body postures can be one thing that come up. As we go a bit deeper into mindfulness, sometimes what can come up is memories from the past. Like where have you felt this way before? That's when we start to dig into what the root cause is. Other things that can come up, I've worked with some really creative people in this work, and it's been fun where we go on this really magical journey sometimes too, where it's just colors and shapes and music and different things like that will come up as energy signatures is kind of how I see it in the body. They just come up in different ways. So it can be things like that as well. Felt sensations, colors, shapes, and we start to just deepen into that more. So we deepen into the experience so that you can have the greatest felt experience that you're able to have in that moment of whatever it is that's coming up. I like the phrase we need to feel to heal. So we start to feel into it, we start to dive a bit deeper into it until we get to whatever that root cause is. So we create different scenarios, different experiments is kind of what we call them. We set up different experiments to just see, well, if we tried it in this different way, then how does the body respond? What we're really searching for is whatever the missing need was that separated us from love to begin with. Right, because that's really what this is. It's about that, like, we were born connected to love, and then something happened that separated us, that from knowing that we are our true, loving, authentic selves. So we start to repair those pieces of ourselves that got separated. The whole process of Hakomi is to bring us back into wholeness. And so as we start to repair those things and we start to remember more of who we truly are, we start to be able to let go of those unconscious patterns that we have that are protecting ourselves because we've created a picture that the world is unsafe, emotionally speaking, for us. And we start to, yeah, just be able to express ourselves more. So we go deeper into it until we find a place that's asking for transformation. We create that felt experience so the body can actually feel what it's like. So I'll give an example. So say you're a 6-year-old child and you run up to your mom, you're super excited, you want a hug, and she's like busy in the kitchen. She's like, "Go away, I don't want to talk to you right now." And then that child is just kind of frozen in that moment. That 6-year-old doesn't know that mom is busy and she's stressed and frazzled and everything else that's going on in mom's life. In her adult life, this is just a 6-year-old child. The 6-year-old child develops a belief in that moment that I'm not worthy of love, or don't do that again. Don't you dare reach out for a hug again, because not like you don't get what you need, right? So then that child might start to pull back and not, unless the mother recognizes it and can repair that happened. But if that's the continuing recurrence, this child might recognize that like it's not okay to reach out for a hug, or it's not okay to ask for love, or at a deeper level, I'm not lovable. So that once we tap into that in a session, and people can tap into this themselves as well. But this is why I talk about it's so important to do healing in relationship, or it can be healing to do healing work in relationship. It can be beneficial, because what we would do in that moment in mindfulness, you're accessing a different part of your brain, that when we're in our imagination, it's as if it's happening in real time in the moment. And so we'll create a situation where it can either be in your imagination or even physically, if you're doing this work in person, like in physical presence with one another. You can create a scenario where you imagine yourself as that young child going up to ask for a hug, and then the practitioner gives you a hug.
Um,
And so when you receive that, you're like, "Oh, this is what it feels like. I didn't know that." Like, I can ask for a hug and this person's going to give me one when I ask for it. You have a felt sense in your body. So your brain now can rewire, and you can actually feel what it feels like to receive that. When for so long, you may have been living your whole life just not even aware or knowing that it's okay to ask, that if you ask, you will receive. And you just don't necessarily know what it's like to receive that hug or that love. Once you have that felt sense, you're like, "Oh, this is what it feels like." Okay. The body automatically comes out of fight or flight or freeze, and it can start to move in the world differently. And you start to attract, I think this is where the energetics comes in more, which I don't know as much about as you do. But I think once that energy pattern changes in your body, then your world changes. You start attracting people to you that want to give you hugs and that will come to you and create those experiences with you, because you're not unconsciously being like, "I don't need a hug. I don't need a hug. I don't need a hug." You're not putting that energy out into the world anymore. The energy shifts around it. So your whole reality changes from there. More importantly, you start to believe that you are worthy of love and that we are all just love at the end of the day. So it's about finding our way back to that.
I just have to take a minute with that. I just really felt that scenario in that moment of having the experience of being eyes closed, back in time in that younger body, and then really from that younger experience being able to receive whatever felt as though it was missing. And what a powerful transformation exactly for the body. The body is really our Akashic Library holding all of our memories. And a word you've said multiple times in sharing this was the energy of love. I feel at such a core foundation that coming back into this wholeness and receiving and being able to fully let love flow again really is quite the foundation of any type of work that will help us kind of restore the current of energy that's flowing through our body. And what a powerful explanation, too, of how important it is to allow our mind to shut down. And, in a lot of the work that I do with individuals, I use a phrase that it's called It's not about being the storyteller anymore. It's now about being the detective.
That's where the
And
curiosity part comes in. Yeah,
yeah,
exactly.
and it's just a fun way the guides have kind of shared with me to impart the idea that we don't want it is not talk therapy. We're
Mhm.
here to start to be the witness to our body. What is it trying to say? And in order to listen, we have to be silent for a moment and start to become aware of the subtleties of the nuances. Where is it affecting me? What is that feeling like? And I do say I love another type of therapy. I don't do sessions completely through this format, but I invite this to anybody facilitating sessions to maybe dive into something called clean language.
Mm,
And this is I apologize, I don't have off the top of my head who originated it, but I do know there's an author, Judy Reese, that has written quite a few books, or you can find YouTube videos where she shares the process. But what it is it's a way to then become the detective without inputting information
yeah,
into there. So
exactly.
if somebody says, "Oh my gosh, my stomach is just turning in knots," as the witness, we could just be, "Hmm, it's turning in knots.
Exactly.
What kind of knots are those knots?"
Mhm.
And so I think that's for whether someone's a parent, an educator, someone working with children, adults, even, it doesn't matter. It's such a neat way to feel heard and received by another person. They're not
Mhm.
trying, it's clean language, I think, is a beautiful way to not talk over someone or try to say, oh, well, this is how I interpret it. Rather, it's just saying, oh, this is what I'm hearing you saying. What kind of knots are those knots? Or what kind of pain is that pain? So
Mhm.
it's kind of the diving into the language of metaphors is what it's based into, that humanity as a human species, that we actually communicate in metaphors. And so when we start to listen to our metaphors will begin to give us the ways to create new metaphors.
It's quite the trip to go on that journey. It's so cool to see what can come up. And that is the thing, when you are the practitioner or just holding space for somebody else, when you can step out of the way of that person's natural healing process, when you can put your ego aside and this is something that I had to learn in my practice, which came along later with my health coach training and with the Hakomi training as well, is that we're not there to be the expert. Like, you are not the expert on that person's like life experience. You are there to just hold space. They are the expert. And this was one of the things that I learned when I took my coaching training that completely took the weight off of my shoulders for when I'm working with people is that the people you're working with, they are resourceful. Their bodies know how to heal themselves. They know their own felt experience of this life better than anybody else. And we don't really have a place to tell somebody what they should be feeling, what they should be experiencing, how they should be experiencing it. When we start to hold that space of clean communication where we're just reflecting back to the person what's going on, right? Because that's what we're doing is we're just being a reflection to them so that they can, and this is why I think it's helpful when it happens in relationship, is that when we need that other perspective sometimes to reflect back to us what is happening within us. And when that reflection is coming towards us with love and non-judgment, then we have that experience that we can have our experience in a loving, non-judgmental, curious space, which again just helps to settle that nervous system right down. Anything that we've been holding in our nervous system our whole lives, all those traumas that have built up automatically just fades away. Um, but I love that you brought that up, Becca, because I think that is something that I keep seeing in the coaching world a lot is I've done it this way. I'm here to teach you to do it this way, and your process needs to be the same as mine. And I just don't think we're here to learn from one another for sure, but there is something about getting out of the way of somebody's own healing process and just allowing them to be, if you're a person that moves quickly, like I'm a person that moves very quickly a lot of the time, if I'm with somebody who needs to move slow, like, I'm the one that needs to slow down, right? It's not for them to speed up to meet my energy. As a practitioner, I'm there to slow down to meet them where they're at, right? So, when we can recognize, and this is a skill that's acquired over time as we do our own healing, when we can recognize what it means to hold that space and to be mindful as ourselves as practitioners as well of how am I reacting to what this person is sharing? What is it triggering in me? Because that is where we can re-traumatize people is when we're not mindful of our own reactions and we start projecting our own hurts and our own pains onto our clients. That is just something that we have to come into a mindful space of as well. That we're not directing people based on our own experiences and our own pain bodies as well, that we're still just holding that clean slate for them to have their own experience.
Mm. I think that's actually really significant to even the statement of we're not here to fix anyone.
Mm.
And, that again is where it rounds back to that we're all responsible for our own journey and for going inward and actually being mindful of where our motivation is for everything that we're doing.
Mhm.
As the more that we come into a peaceful, calm, and centered place, and this would kind of come back into the idea of that financial advisor story is, is the person that you're seeking guidance from, is their life magic? Are they in a
Mhm.
state of peace? We're always all gonna, I feel, this again is a perception, but I always feel that we're gonna be in a state of expanding, learning, diving deeper into ourselves. So I don't feel there's anybody necessarily on the planet that has it all figured out. We're not floating around in light body is what I say. I'm like, until you can start levitating and floating, then I'll be like, "Oh, well, maybe," but otherwise, we're all in this human experience together. And so it truly is. It's like, when we can really mirror with someone who has that sense of, again, holding that neutral, compassionate witness. They might not have all their stuff figured out, so to speak, but at the same time, can they at least click into that space where it's not about them?
Mhm.
We're not
That's
here
all
to
it is,
fix
Becca.
anybody. Yeah.
All it is. We don't have like you said, we don't have to have our own stuff figured out. We just have to realize when we're in that session, it's not about us.
And when that happens, now I think we're truly creating healthy relationships.
Mhm.
That's kind of that foundation, where we get to sit and even to come back to this one idea. Let's say we are with our partner and the conversation gets heated, or you're with your boss or your business partner or a family member. That one happens a lot. And there is kind of like this push and pull of a heated discussion that is happening. And there is this level of when we get to mindfulness where we start to say, it's not about us. Let me just listen for a moment. What is it that they're not feeling received for? Where is the love not flowing through? Where we can actually stop and say, you know what? I value our friendship or our work arrangement or our relationship or our family. I value this so much that I don't want to answer right now.
Mhm.
I really want to just take a breath because this is too important for me for us to say anything that isn't actually coming from the heart.
Mhm.
And to be able to take that breath and, I wish I could give credit to where I heard this from, but there was a particular practice. It might be something related to heart math, I'm not sure. But this technique that if you and your partner, this would be someone that you obviously are probably a little closer to, but if you say and someone close to you is having a misalignment in communication, that you can stand face to face for a moment and just even the one thing is just to match your breathing rhythm
Mm.
and just
Mhm.
stop for a moment and sync your breath. Your conversation and your level of communication will automatically change to being more
Wow.
harmonious. And then they took it a little bit further and said, if you, after you sync the breath, if you could actually both start toning, say do like an om or a tone, let your sound vibration come out. And then the other person is doing the same thing. You'll find that your sound tones will harmonize.
Mhm.
And when you get into that sync of a vibrational frequency of sound tones, it's literally like all of the resistance falls away, and all of a sudden our hearts become more open to listen or hear the.
Mhm. Yeah. That's beautiful. That's creating safety. That's like using vibration to create safety. That's interesting. I've never heard that before. But you're right. That's a technique where you can create safety because when we have safety, we're more open to hearing what the other person has to say. When we don't feel safe and we're in a place of defensiveness, then we can't take in. So even if you're in a dynamic like that, maybe you're feeling grounded and safe and the other person isn't. The idea would be to ask them, like, what do you need to feel safe right now? Like, what is going to help just bring this down so that we can both be open to hear one another? Because both parties need to be out of a state of defensiveness in order to hear one another. We can't hear when we're feeling defensive. And that's when mindfulness comes in. If you notice in yourself, I'm really defensive right now. I'm not going to be able to take in what you're saying. Let me calm myself down so that I can come into a place where I can hear what you're saying to me and we can actually be open and receptive. We can't solve problems if we're not open and receptive to hearing what the other person has to say and to hold space for them as well. We just keep throwing defenses back and forth, back and forth. So I love that technique as creating, like, this is how we can, like, if there's an agreement between those two individuals that this is how we're going to create safety so that we can have a mindful conversation, which goes back to what you said about being responsible for our own process, right? To be able to own that I'm reacting to this, not you're causing this reaction in me, right? It's when this happens, this is it might not be your intention, but this is the impact. So sometimes another technique that I learned in my yoga teacher practice was having a conversation about intention and impact. Because sometimes we have the intention to say something, but like you said earlier, it's not received the way that we intended it to. It somehow goes through the airwaves and all of the filters that we have, and it lands on that person in a way that we didn't intend it to. And we had no idea that was going to. That's why we need communication, because we don't know what people's filters are. We don't know how they're perceiving us. We don't know how things are coming out. It's going to be different depending on different people's filters. And so that's why communication, I think, is so important in relationship. I haven't figured out yet how to resolve conflict without communication. I think maybe there are some people that are beautiful at doing that, but that's not my strength. I think communication is huge. So when you can take responsibility for your own and the person you're resolving conflict with takes responsibility for themselves, you create safety. You can have a real conversation to help each other resolve whatever it is that's going on. And that's the ideal. We talk about, I've read so many books on this, and all of the books that I read talk about what to do in an ideal situation. So if you can create this ideal situation with another, what we don't talk about is when we're trying to get to this place, but the person we're trying to resolve conflict with isn't in a place to come to this ideal, wherever they are at in their consciousness, it's not their intention to come into this place of safety. Then we need to talk more about like setting boundaries and things like that, right? It becomes a different conversation. So it can be frustrating sometimes when you're trying to create this safety with somebody who isn't in a place where they're intentionally wanting to create this with you. That's a whole other thing that needs to
Thank
be
you.
addressed.
Thank you for bringing that up because, one of the things that was coming up with mindfulness is that piggybacked on that, I think, just kind of in tandem with mindfulness and stepping into being the compassionate witness literally then brings in the vibration of empathy. And empathy is about truly listening with our heart, our energetic nervous system, how it's reading their energy, their aura. It's empathy is really listening from our larger light bodies to how another is communicating, and then being able to have an awareness of how our interaction with them is creating waves or ripples through their consciousness or through their nervous system, or how they are reacting to what we are saying. And empathy is truly about kind of feeling where another person's coming from, because we're tapping into their wavelength.
Mhm.
But what you said is so vital about the permissions, about now as you're reading empathically of what they are moving through the wavelengths, now we can feel, are they stuck in that, or is our neutralizing of our energy allowing their wavelengths to begin to have space to rearrange or move into more wholeness or in a more balanced energy? Or are they just in an argumentative state where they're not going to get out of their point of view, and they just want you to know that you're wrong, or that what you did, or that their point, like you're saying, that pointing fingers thing, and so then we start to feel, oh no, they're happy where they are with their
Mhm.
mind frame. And then that's where I think that level of maturity comes in, where we, even as practitioners, have to determine this with clients.
Mhm.
Are they just wanting someone to hear their story because that's where they're comfortable?
Mhm.
Or is their movement, are they seeking
Mhm.
change? And this, again, this is all in the dynamics of relationships. And then we set our energy appropriately. You know, if it
Mhm.
is a family member and they're just stuck in this belief system, how do we now rearrange
Yeah.
ourselves so that as an empath, we're now not just getting dumped on
Mhm.
by this energy because we're trying to fix or
Yeah.
make them happy or make them feel better or all of these things. And so again, this just is we can see this as a spiral of healing, that as we again learn to validate ourselves. You said something in the very beginning of our conversation, and I think this is so perfect to kind of wrap our whole conversation up. Is you said within there that one of the most beautiful practices is to learn to start speaking kindly to ourselves, be non-judgmental with ourselves, love ourselves. Maybe do that mirror work where you stand in front of a mirror and say those things or write those things to yourself, the love letter.
Mhm.
And then when we feel that completion of feeling so loved, then there is no needing to seek it outside of ourselves. So therefore, there is less of a tendency for us to have our empathy misused within this reality, so that it can be that beautiful energy that it's meant to be, of that co-connection with
Mhm.
others.
Mm.
What a magical place.
That is the perfect way to bring this full circle, I think, this conversation is that, again, when you're trying to create those healthy dynamics and you're not able to, there's a lesson within yourself then that's asking to be learned. So are you falling into your people pleasing pattern, or are you like, is it calling you to be in your power more? And the power that we have is to go inward. Because especially if you've been attracting a lot of that in your life, you might not be able to create that health in the relationships that are in your world right now. So creating that health and that safety within yourself. I like to call it empowered, compassionate communication. Because I think as people pleasers or as empaths, we're not always empowered in our compassionate in our compassion, or we're not always empowered in our empathy. So there is a place to step up into our empowerment, that we can still hold our ground and um not fall into people pleasing, but still be in a place of compassion. Yeah. I love that. So yes, coming into yourself, giving yourself that compassion, talking kindly to yourself. being able to just say, "This is hard. What I'm going through right now is really hard." And, we're not always gonna show up perfectly in these we can, again, describe ideally how these conversations could go. And if we have a willing partner, a willing friend, we can get there with it. Um, but we're not always we have our own pains that are being triggered too. And so we need to come back to ourselves to have compassion for that as well.
Your magic.
Aw, so are you.
Kristen, thank you so much for sharing this amazing conversation. I definitely feel so much transformation within myself when we have these conversations and these shared just introspections. And I just my whole kind of desire, I guess, from the core of my heart is that this might be able to touch others in an inspirational way. And how can people reach out to you if they're guided to maybe try Hakomi or
Mhm.
experience some of this deep, deep, deep healing?
Yes, yes, yes. I love that. So if people are looking for more work in that area, they can visit my website, which is www.soulinspired.ca. And we'll leave the links for that as well in the comment section below.
Beautiful. And I
And what
will.
about yourself, Becca? How can people reach out to you? Because actually, I've done work with you. You're doing Hakomi work, even though it's not specifically Hakomi work. The process that you use is very similar to what we've talked about today.
It is very, very similar, and it's such a passion to get to really work with individuals. One of the primary ways I work with a lot of individuals is through soul coaching. So basically, meeting someone right where they are so that we can just take that journey into really starting to feel oneself step into the highest potential that we know exists within us within this lifetime. And my website is withbecca.com. So it's my name. If you wanted to do a session with Becca, I tried to make it really easy.
Sessions
And
are so healing for me. They helped me through a really difficult time that I was having and really helped open me up to be where I am today. So I highly recommend those sessions.
so with so much love to everyone, and we'll invite you to join us on our next conversation. Thank
All
you.
right. Take care, everybody.